Welcome to our podcast. Today we are going to be discussing self awareness. We've been having a lot of biblical topics, and we thought, okay, well, it's all good, but we did say we'll be discussing multiple things, and self awareness is something I wouldn't say unbiblical, but something not really that would be classified as a biblical topic, but we do believe it's very important to discuss. And firstly, or secondly, a big thank you. I was back in Porch this weekend and received a lot of feedback from multiple people who say that the podcast has been very valuable in terms of Bible study and in terms of the thought-provoking questions that brings up, and they're really questioning a lot of things, and it's really helping their relationship with the Lord. So that's very inspiring
What a
to
blessing.
hear. To hear, yes, yes. So thank you guys,
I'll
Jordan.
just kick in there. My dad, I just want to give a shout out to him. He's been commenting on every video, and to get that feedback every single video and see that someone is really engaging with your ideas, it's such a nice feeling. But yeah,
Yeah.
otherwise, let's go.
So for this podcast, in terms of self-awareness, it's quite a broad topic. So we're gonna start off with it in this podcast, but we might be breaking it up into multiple ones because there's just so much to say about it. So please stay tuned. And then, Jordan, can you kick off for us?
I'll kick off for us. So I think when I thought about the idea of self-awareness, it's a word that you're very comfortable with in thinking you understand, but when you go and do some research and really go and every time it comes up, you realize it's so deep and it has so many aspects to it that you wouldn't expect. And I think what I would like to do first is just outline why. Why self-awareness? Why is it necessary? What does it do for your life? And what is the alternative? But not really diving into any definitions or detail about it. So the first thing I thought about when I thought about self-awareness was a very geographical example, and it seemed very poetic when I wrote it down, but it probably won't be as poetic when I say it now. But essentially, I thought, how can you know you are happy if you don't know where you are? And the idea there is you can't assess your current life and understand yourself if you cannot open your eyes and see. And the second part of that is, how do you know that you've gotten anywhere if you don't know where you were? And the idea there is, if you do not or are not able to very accurately understand who you are and where you are, you're very much walking in a forest and you're tripping over the same branch, thinking it's a brand new branch. And the reason, even though it sounds a bit silly, I used that metaphor was because a very similar thing happened to me. So I have this tendency that when I reach my lowest low, when I'm really in a bad place, I'll write down some stuff. I'm like, well, I need to really write down what's happening in my life right now and give a really like mini essay about what I'm feeling and what's happening in my life. So I did that the first time I felt very low. This was about a while ago. And then about 6 months later, I was feeling very much down low and in the same place. And then I opened that same journal entry and I started reading the previous one, and I realized it was exactly what I was about to write. And that put me in a very sad realization that I was in exactly the same place that I was 6 months ago. Nothing had really changed and I hadn't improved. And it's a very sad realization. And so it's a very big call to the metaphor of you need to know where you are and you need to know where you're going and you need to understand yourself. So that's my motivation. I read a book now very recently that used a quote, very, very harsh quote, but it says, even dead bodies can float downstream. And the idea there is it's very easy to just live without intention, to live without understanding what you're doing, to live without knowing what you're doing Now it's impacting other people. A dead man can do that, but to be alive is to be intentional and to understand who you are and where you are and what you are. This is very philosophical,
No, it's beautiful. It's beautifully said.
but not very practical.
Yeah, that's true. Just to comment on that, it seems like you're saying you shouldn't just react to life. To live is to have a will and is to impose that will on your life. If you were dead, you would have no choice to change anything. You just float down the river.
And the point there is the first step is self-awareness.
If you're aware of where you are and what is happening around you, you can actually impose something on it.
To be intentional, you need to understand where you are.
Right. So let's get practical.
Let's get practical.
All right. A practical approach to self-awareness. So I thought about this and I tried to break it down because it's a we all know, oh, self-awareness, you must be self-aware. Put it on your CV. I am self-aware.
Skill.
24 years experience. but what does it mean to be self-aware in terms of practically living it out? And I thought of it in two levels. I think 2 levels, 3 categories. So each of the 3 categories have 2 levels. So you can think of, let me not do it grammatically. So the first level, level 1, is you must be aware of what you think, what you do, and what you feel. Okay, so I broke it up into those 3 categories. Because remember, self-awareness goes about the self. And when you look at yourself, you know that there's things you do, there's things you think, and there's things you feel. So the first level of self-awareness is to be aware. What is those things that you think and you do and you feel? The second level will be why. Why do you do what you do? Why do you think what you think? And why do you feel what you feel? And that's where it becomes a bit harder, hence level 2. So I think a practical approach for what people is to just look at themselves. If you could, have yourself outside of your body when you're doing things, look at what you're doing. How does it look from the outside perspective? How does it sound to other people what you're saying? What are you feeling? Basically, realize that, and that's something you brought up earlier. If you're not aware of what you're feeling, it's going to be kind of like, I'm just feeling something, and then you don't know what that means. And if you don't understand what you feel, you're once again just floating down the river. I believe feelings and emotions we feel are supposed to be indicators of something, and an indicator of how you as a person is reacting to whatever is making you feel that way. And if you can understand how you feel, you can understand how you as a person is reacting. And in that way, you can get to know yourself, who you are. Am I a person that is, let's say, an example, I walk into a room of 20 people and I feel not very comfortable. It could mean I'm a shy person. It could mean I'm uncomfortable with people I don't know. If you don't know what you're feeling, you're just like, I'm sick.
So you can't ignore the feelings.
You're
almost calling that, okay. You're emphasizing the importance of the feel.
Yes, that's the first one I thought of. But if you go back to the importance of what you do, you can very easily manipulate people without knowing that you're manipulating them. And I've caught myself doing this, and I was shook because I understand how a person thinks because I've studied it and I've been very intrigued by it to such a point where I don't have to think about what they're thinking. Sounds very scary, but when I know someone, I can kind of understand how they're thinking. And to my horror, I realized I was saying things specifically in a way to make them do what I wanted them to do. It was a good thing. It wasn't like a bad manipulation, but still it was manipulation because I knew the way I say it is gonna convince them to do what I wanted them to do for me, specifically because of how I was doing it. Because I understood more than I maybe should have, but I was aware of it, self-aware. But thanks to level 2 self-awareness, I realized, okay, but what I'm doing isn't, in my opinion, correct. We can go into that a bit later, but you mentioned an example earlier today about the parenting and the dangers of not knowing. Or you can go into that, please.
Yeah. The idea there was just something that I was having a conversation with one of my aunts. And
You think she's watching? You're like, yeah, you know who you are.
yeah, and we were having a conversation, not really about this, but she brought up the fact that, you know, a lot of parents will adopt a certain parenting style because that's how it was with them. So because I had to do this, you will have to do this. And the issue we were explaining with that is you are, and I coined the term earlier on, you're absolving yourself of the moral responsibility, and I want to call it moral laziness that you're doing there. You're not thinking, why am I doing this? What cause effect does it have? And am I comfortable with that cause and effect? You're simply retracting all of those thoughts and not even thinking that far and just saying, because it happened to me, it happened to you. And almost I don't want to say sort of revenge to your parents, although it can be that, but it's also a lazy sit back. I'm not even going to think about why I'm doing this. I'm just going to do it. And it's quite ignorant. But that's the do. And I suppose if I had to link it to what you were saying in the way that you'd want, it's a example where you are doing something without understanding why completely, and also ignoring its consequences in your life. But that's the do.
Yeah. I actually want to give an example about the do, right? So I'm thinking parents, this is a common thing, they spank their kids when the kids are doing something they're not supposed to be doing. So let's say my parents spanked me, and now I have kids. Now I spank my kids, because that's what you do when your kids are being naughty, right? And I don't think about what I'm doing. I'm just doing it because it happened to me, and now it's happening to them. But is that, if I'm not aware of that, what I'm doing, the fact that I'm spanking them, if I don't question, firstly, if I'm not aware of that I'm doing it, but that's quite a hard thing not to be aware of. But you must be, I think, you can very easily miss the things you do because you do so many things. So if you identify something, okay, this is something I do, then you can question that specific thing that you do and ask, okay, why do I do it? And if the answer is because my parents did it, I'm sorry, that's invalid. That's not a good reason to do something, because your parents might have done it because their parents did it, and their parents because their parents did it. And it's the cycle of who is going to start thinking, okay, should I be spanking my kid, or should I be having a hard, stern conversation with him about what he's doing? Because personally, for me, I think that would have rocked me much more than, oh, I got spanked. But okay,
Yeah,
I'm not
I think
saying how.
what's also important there is if you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, you don't know how to do it the right way. So
Also,
the example you're bringing up now, disciplining your kids, the way in which you do it is born out of, well, if you do it intentionally. If you're doing something intentionally, the way that you do it is born out of how you understand the reason for what you're doing. So if you understand that to discipline them is an act of love, and it should be done in a certain way, you're going to do it very differently than someone that just does it as a reaction mechanism to how they were being brought up. But yes.
but that touches on the other one, how you think. Why do you think that spanking them is, disciplining them, which equals love? But there's actually another example I wanted to use here, because this is a very treasured memory of mine. I had a beautiful conversation with my mom about the danger of allowing yourself to forget certain things, right? So let's go back to that conversation. So I was giving her this example. Let's say, because obviously I was talking to my mom, so I was using myself as an example. I'm playing this rugby match in high school, and I'm actually a really mean kid, and I'm punching them in the ruck. I'm like being a very dirty rugby player, and I am just being, bad player. A bully. And I kick the guy in the shin, and I take the ball and I go score a try. And then I'm like, yes, I'm so good. And obviously she sees that and she's like, it's not a good try. But because she doesn't want to remember me that way, she can choose to forget that part of it. And what happens is when she thinks back about that event of the rugby, all she remembers is the try I scored. And if that happens enough times, then you start lying to yourself, kind of. You kind of start manipulating yourself about your perspective of someone because of how you want to see them. So when you're not aware, because thinking leads to what you do, it leads to what you feel. It's like kind of the pivotal one here. If you are not aware of what you think, I would almost say don't even know who you are. If you don't know what you think and why you think that way, you are a person who's not living. You're a person who's just reacting to life. And if you're just simply reacting to life, that's why people think that we're in a simulation, because there's so many people that don't think for themselves. They don't think outside of what seems to be the next best choice or the next step. And if you actually actively engage with what am I doing, why am I doing these things, what am I thinking and what am I thinking of to do and why, then you become a person who is more in control of themselves as well. Because isn't self-control also a pivotal thing that we need to master as Christians? And if I don't know what I'm thinking and why I'm thinking these things, self-control becomes a very difficult task to manage, because now I can think that this thing is okay. I didn't question why I think it's okay. I just think it's okay. And now I don't think I need self-control. So how are you going to practice self-control about something that you don't even think is wrong if you don't question these things? So that's the third example.
So you've given an example of each type now: think, feel, and do.
Yes.
I'm interested. There's a common mantra. You think, I think you feel, the way that you feel influences the way that you think, which makes you act a certain way. I don't know if you've heard of that before.
Yeah.
But was that strategic in your breakdown of the different aspects of self-awareness? Why those three?
Because a person is made up of mind, body, soul. So I kind of was like, okay.
So it's an abstraction of those three.
I can't say, yeah, you can kind of say that it's the abstraction of those things. And I think everything can be broken down into those three things. Everything in yourself. It's how I impose my will on the world is going to be physical, and which is affected by my mentality and my emotions. So that's kind of the three.
So a big problem that I'm thinking now about this is, if you think of someone that is delusional, right? They feel something, they think something because of those feelings, and then they act on it.
Mm-hmm.
And they can know exactly why. I feel this way because this person looked at me and they, I feel like they are angry at me, and therefore I felt anger towards them. I thought of something I could say to them, and now I'm saying that something to them. So what is there not a, it's so easy to be delusioned that you are self-aware. So where's the disconnect between someone that is delusionally self-aware and someone that is actually self-aware? How do you put those two together?
So I would say that goes kind of back to our conversation about subjective and objective truth, but not looking at objective truth. You can still look at yourself in a way and use external sources to match. So, and this is what I love about friends and other people, is how they can give me feedback about who I am.
Good friends.
Good, even bad friends, those are the best in terms of feedback, you know. They give
Sometimes
you
they lie to you.
yeah. But then you must question it.
Yes.
Why? Is this true? Does this align? But if someone can give me anything about myself that I dislike, I'm very happy to hear that.
So just to cut you off there, the reason I brought up the delusional aspect is because if you just compare yourself to yourself and you only look at yourself and you just look within yourself and you try to figure yourself out by just looking at yourself, you will be able to figure out an objective reality that is delusional.
That's subjective reality.
Well, to you it's objective. That's why I used objective reality.
No, but you can never find.
Yeah,
the
but to yourself it seems objective. That's the point.
Okay. If you're
so
prideful enough.
if you're not comparing yourself to good sources, you won't be able to tell whether your self-awareness analysis is true.
I'd rather say more or enough sources than good sources.
That could be true, but ultimately we still the first point drives home is look at all those different levels and understand what is actually going on. And I think most men have a problem with this in terms of the feeling aspect. It's very easy to think and to do and to understand, no, I did this because I thought this, but they're very, very shy away from the feelings. And it's because to listen to your feelings is, I think, you need to have a good ear, you need to be tuned to that frequency. And it's something that a lot of people aren't very good at. They fabricate feelings with hindsight. There's a lot of mess to that. But the point being, if you can do that first step, then you can start comparing yourself to literature. Oh, okay, I did this and I thought I felt this, but you'll find that commonly people that do this have this feeling, and then maybe that makes a bit more sense for your reality, and then you can go from there. But that's the point. The first step is to understand, what is it that I feel, and what is it that I think I feel?
Yes. I think, now that I think about it, what you're thinking is kind of who you are as a person. And
I think, therefore I am.
I think, therefore I am. And what you feel is your body's reaction on the environment or what happens, and that can be an indication of who you are. And then also what you do, as scripture says, I only know the Afrikaans quote, what the heart is full of, the mouth overflows of. I think that's the English one.
Yeah.
But you know the verse I'm saying, basically. And that also is like what you're doing, what you're saying, points towards what's inside. So what you do as a person is going to point towards who you are as a person. So the whole concept of self-awareness is to figure out who you are. And I think looking at your actions, looking at your feelings, and looking at your thoughts helps you figure that out. But how do I know what actions and thoughts to look at? Because I do a million things a day. Should I question, why do I brush my teeth? Why do I brush my teeth in this way? So don't go and, question everything that's pointless. So how do you know what is good to question? Because obviously, even a fool believes his own way to be right. We all think what we're doing is right, otherwise we wouldn't be doing it. If I knew what I'm doing is wrong, obviously I wouldn't be doing it. So realize that in yourself, and then other people, they're doing what they believe to be right and the correct way of doing things. So I would challenge people, if they want to really practically gain self-awareness, is go to your close friends, go to people you trust, and say to them, I'm looking to gain self-awareness, but you as a person really need to be ready and open-hearted and want to hear this. And you ask them anything that they know about, that they've noticed in you as a person, externally, obviously, for what you've done, for what you said, how you reacted, that they have, raised an eyebrow, found a concern, or would point you towards to go look at, because obviously you might not have been able to see it. So they will be the best people to ask for introspection, so that you can know what to go look at. But then that's in your table. Then that's on your hands. You need to then go and look at, okay, I do see myself doing this. Because if someone tells me, no, Ruan, you steal money every day, I'm like, I've never seen myself steal money. It's not going to help because I haven't seen it, but I might be doing it. But now they've pointed me to go look at something that I could not notice me doing. And now I can look at that action, and then I can question, why am I doing it? So that's, I would say, the threefold process in gaining self-awareness. Just go to people, ask them to point out things for you. Then look at yourself doing them. Make sure you realize you actually do them. And then look at why you're doing them to understand. And then, obviously, if it's not a good thing, stop doing it. But if it's a good thing, look at something else to fix.
Yeah, this is also a word of caution. I always come with word of caution to your advice.
Because I'm like, do it this way. And you're like, whoa, Ron, you can mess someone's life up.
I'll go back to a quote I've already said on this podcast of Jordan Peterson. It's not quote, but an idea that he gives, which is, be careful what advice you give someone,
I like this quote.
right? Because if you tell them to do something and it works, that's not their victory, it's yours. And if you tell them to do something and it doesn't work out, whose loss is that?
Who has to deal with the
Who has to deal with it?
consequences?
They do, and they didn't even make the decision, so they can't properly reflect on the decision that they made and then learn in the future. They just took advice. So be careful with the way that you take advice from other people, and understand, if someone was to come to you, what would happen in your mind, and how would you go about giving them that sort of answer. And that will perhaps help you in identifying the way that you should take what they are saying. You can't take that as concrete evidence. They aren't perfect at articulating their ideas. So you can almost, I would say take it as, there's something in there that could be true, and there's something that they wish to express. But that is also, there's so much bias in there. It depends on their personality, what they think is right. Are they a brother in Christ or sister in Christ, will also influence the type of answer that they would give, because that changes their perspective on what you should be like. So there's a lot of aspects that you should consider. You can't just ask your friends to be like, hey man, I want to be a better person. What am I doing wrong? That is a monumental question to answer. And if your friend just gives you an answer quickly,
Yeah.
I would also raise caution there.
It's like, nah, man, you're just the good guy, man.
Yeah. So I would say yes, that is definitely a source of reflection you can use. But to me, literature is actually a very big one. Every time I read, I find myself. I find something about myself, and I see a reflection of myself, something that I never knew I was doing, but when someone describes it, I'm like, hey, I do this and I feel exactly this way. And sometimes that can be misleading because you're looking for things, but you can say that for anything.
That's what I actually want to point out. I think you've reached a level of self-awareness where you are actively looking for your flaws. People who have gone their whole life not looking for their flaws, it's very hard for them to read a book and be like, oh yeah, I do this. It's going to be like,
it's a good point.
Look at this horrible person I'm reading about,
Yeah.
and then goes and does it themselves. So that's why I'd say there's the harsher reality of people, exterior people, but don't ask them to point out your flaws and then they tell you your flaw, and then you're like,
What kind of a friend
I
are
am
you?
not gonna see you again.
What kind of a
Because
friend?
that has happened to me. There was a person, they asked me, what do you not like about me? And then I told them, but they were not happy. And maybe I shouldn't have been so honest,
Yeah.
but I thought honesty is a good thing. So I learned a lesson that day.
It's just tough. I think I was in grade something. Can't remember the grade. When I did a drawing for someone, and then I asked my friend for critical advice. He said, the eyes look a bit too close together, and there's not enough definition in the eyes. And I was just like, what the hell? Come on, man. Yeah, so be ready if that's what you want. And also realize that if someone is talking from that space, they're not considering your feelings. They're genuinely trying to be critical, and not everything they're saying is true. But perhaps something in there is right. So, but fine.
Let's flip it around.
Yes.
Would you go to someone and just point out their flaws? Unasked.
I'd have to care about them a lot. I would only do that to people that I really care about.
We say that, right? But we don't do that.
In a relationship, I've had a lot of time to come to a point where I can say that, but I couldn't do it comfortably. But I think in a family situation, that's more of a tough question. How often do you? For some people that's very easy in their families. They're very willing to tell their siblings what's wrong with them. But yeah, people that you care about, your friends, how often do you tell them easily, hey man, I saw this thing and I really think it's a problem?
I think how you approach those conversations and the scene you set when you do it, I think is very important. I've learned from
experience.
From experience that you should do it one-on-one, and you must do it like very calmly, and you must mentally prepare them. You must sow the seeds kind of ahead of time, like, hey, I want to have this conversation with you. It's quite serious, but we can have it later, just so that they know it's coming. And then when it's happening, it's like, okay, here it is. But if you just like, hey, you're a terrible person.
No, it is true, it is
It's
true,
just
obviously.
not smart.
No, your intention has to, and you need to, if you're going to do that without them asking, you better have a very good reason. You better have a very good
It's
reason.
because you love them.
No, I mean, it better be something that you really think they should change. You should really have some,
Like an intervention, that kind
yeah.
of.
So you better have a good reason, and you better be sure about what you're telling them. But ultimately, I agree with you on this point about, I would call it the first step to someone that's never really introspected in how they can start seeing a reflection, because the people around you are a very good representation of who you are, and they can give you a very good critical analysis on your character. But yeah, I think all in all, what we've done here is I've started off giving my very bad poetic version of why you should be self-aware. And I think you've broken up self-awareness into the different aspects of how we behave, and then use that as a practical, or an attempted a practical approach of how can you look at the different aspects of how you behave. And then, well, how do you get feedback on this? Well, the first step could be to go to the people around you and to ask questions about your character, which is a very difficult thing to do, and that's what we have discussed. And we've discussed how you should be prepared for that sort of interaction. You know, I would say, just to sum it up, the whole thing, if that's fine with you.
That's fine.
I said this earlier, so I want to say it again, that really what we're trying to get across here, and we'll probably have a couple more podcasts about it, is that there's so much beauty in living an intentional life. You get to try things intentionally with purpose and see what the result is. And to live a life without that intention it's so sorrowful. It's you cannot reflect. You are left to your own desires. And I think I'm going to close off. My brother was reading this book by Dostoevsky. It's the brothers Karamazov. I can't say that, but anyway, a quote. I'm not going to give the context of it. I'm just going to give the quote, but it's beautiful and it sums up a lot of what we've said now. So it says, above all, do not lie to yourself. A man who lies to himself and listens to his own lie comes to a point where he does not discern any truth, either in himself or anywhere around him, and thus falls into disrespect towards himself and others. Not respecting anyone, he ceases to love, and having no love, he gives himself up to the passions and coarse pleasures, in order to occupy and amuse himself, and in his vices reaches complete bestiality. And it all comes from lying continually to others and himself.
Self-awareness is very close to wisdom, in my opinion. And as it is in the Bible, you must seek it out. And those who seek it will find it. And I'll just look towards the audience as we finish. If you're not self-aware, it's because you're not looking to be self-aware. And that's a harsh reality I want to point out to people. Self-awareness you will find if you want to find it. It's not nice to look at your own flaws, but it's one of the most rewarding things that there can be in life. So I very much like to motivate and encourage people to seek it and to go through that journey. Because look how happy we are. Yeah, okay, that's quite serious.
All right.
But thanks, guys. Until next time.
Till next time.